All right, my friends, thank you very much for another podcast of Eagle Tech Talks. I am here with Tom Speciale. He's a national security consultant, but he's also an author. And we're going to be talking about that, and he also has so many good things that this program is going to be amazing. Tom, how are you doing? Can you explain to people what you do? Because I could not get the whole thing. Yeah, it is a lot.
Right now, I'm a national security consultant. I served in the Trump administration for the beginning of last year with Tulsi Gabbard at the DNI, working counterintelligence and security issues. But my entire intelligence career is working counterterrorism, human intelligence analysis, political military analysis, and and I'm sort of dual-hatted. I've worked at the national level as well as in the Army Reserves. And so I've been in the Army Reserves and on active duty going back all the way to 1987. So I've been doing a lot since 1987. Yeah, I've been around.
Doing a thing or two, right?
Yeah.
But also you were involved in January 6th. And there is a documentary that you're working on that is called Unreasonable Man. Is that still the name?
Yeah, still the name.
All
tentatively
right.
Still the name.
So why don't we start by that, because I have a bunch of questions for you that I know the people that listen to this podcast will be grateful that I asked all these questions, especially because of your background. But this documentary, when you say Unreasonable Man, what is it that you mean, and what do you want to tell people? Because just by the title, I'm already want to see it. I want to see the whole thing. I love to see unreasonable people. So what do you mean by that?
Well, there's a George Bernard Shaw. There was a quote that he said, and he said that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress occurs because of the unreasonable man. So what it means to be the unreasonable man or an unreasonable man is that you don't accept the status quo the way that it is, that you believe that you can have an impact on whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is. So you could be unreasonable in sports, you could be unreasonable in politics, you could be unreasonable. So it's not a negative. It just means that you're not going to accept things the way they are, that they can be made better, and that you're going to do everything you can to make things better. And so my life story is essentially the testimony of an unreasonable man.
So this documentary is mostly, I will probably say half of the documentary is about a book that you already have, and the other half is about the stuff that happened to you after January 6th.
Correct. And
can you go in detail between the first part of the documentary and
Sure.
then the second one?
Yeah, so my first book is called Faith, Family, and Fortitude, Seeing Opportunities Instead of Obstacles, right? And that is, I wrote that book as an autobiography when I decided to run for U.S. Senate in 2019 to 2020. And because I don't believe that if you're running for political office that you get to have privacy. Your life needs to be understood by people. And I think that that's a mistake that we make, as a lot of these politicians keep secrets. I believed in writing Faith, Family, and Fortitude so that people would really know who I was, and to put it down on paper who I was. And those are sort of the three principles of my life, are faith, family, and fortitude. Faith in God, a strong family, and at the same time, fortitude, which is, you hear a lot of people say faith, family, and freedom. Well, for me, it's fortitude, because fortitude is about resiliency. It's about never, ever giving up on yourself, on others. It's part of that unreasonable concept, is that you're resilient to obstacles that either are self-imposed or come at you from outside. And so the first half of the documentary series is on my faith, my family, and the obstacles that I've overcome in my life, and ultimately instilled me with fortitude, which includes the early part of my military career. The second half of the documentary series, when I ran for U.S. Senate, I got endorsed by Veterans for Trump, which was the largest veterans organization that was supporting Donald Trump at the time. On January 6th, As a civilian, I was actually working in the national security community, and I was working domestic extremism at the DNI at the time. And I actually had warned the FBI that we were headed into something potentially bad, that there was a lot of fragility in American society, and I felt that fragility could be preyed upon by outside actors and also domestic actors. And so I literally personally warned the FBI in October of 2020 that we needed to be on the lookout for, what are called black swan events that we can't anticipate. And so on January 6th, I had taken a couple days off as the national spokesman for Vets for Trump and some other organizations I was part of, and I spoke on January 5th and on January 6th, and ultimately I was an eyewitness. I was present on the ground on January 6th. I didn't go into the building, I didn't break any laws, but I was an eyewitness to it. And as a intelligence officer and somebody who's also a military expert, and somebody also who was working domestic extremism and somebody who had warned of potential violence, I felt it important to essentially capture my personal understanding of what actually happened on January 6th. So after January 6th, I actually wrote and published a white paper, a report, just like I would write on any other country, on what I believe are the actual causes of January 6th here in the United States. And why did we get to the point of, hundreds of thousands of American citizens protesting, the vast majority of them protesting peacefully, but very, very essentially rallying on the Capitol grounds. And then that fragility that I had warned of proved out to be true. And we had a breakdown in command and control with the Capitol Police. There was some violence, and ultimately some of the protesters became so angry that they basically broke into the Capitol. And I wasn't one of those people, but I had warned of it. And so that's the second part of the documentary, because, again, I think that a big part of what led me to be at January 6th was because I was an unreasonable man, because I was challenging the status quo, and I was warning of things that most people didn't believe would happen.
So people that want to see the documentary, what do you want to say to them, or just give them a little bit of, a tease of this is what you're going to be watching, learning, so people are expecting when they come out, and hopefully it will come out, to Netflix and any of those streaming platforms.
Right. I would say that the message I think of this documentary is that it's not about me, that it's about all of us kind of questioning the status quo and challenging the status quo, and all of us need to be unreasonable. All of us need, and it's not intuitive unless you really think about what George Bernard Shaw said about being unreasonable. What he's saying is that don't be a sheep, question everything and try and make things better, and you got to be uncompromising. And I hope that this documentary will be like somewhat of a testimony of my overcoming the obstacles in my life, and that ultimately led me to becoming or realizing that I had become the unreasonable man.
And talking about challenges, you describe, and I read the book, and you describe that growing up you were poor. You were working poor class, and is that teach you success? Well, first of all, how come you were poor? I thought the only poor people were minorities.
Which, of course, is which is totally a fallacy. I mean, most people that are poor are white people, or but number-wise, I guess my growing up working poor was my parents were literally worked every day of their life. My dad, I can say honestly, has never had a vacation in his entire life. Every single day of his life he worked. My mom the same way. Every single day of their life working. But at the same time, didn't have a lot of breaks and didn't have a lot of opportunities to go to school. They had 2 kids at a fairly young age. And they just, they worked to put us in a good neighborhood. We grew up in a relatively good neighborhood, a really good neighborhood, really. Good schools. I had parks right near my house, and, but that was only possible because they worked their fingers to the bone. And so, but there were times, the electricity was going to get shut off, and we had to lean on our family for support. And that's where a lot of the, this faith, family, fortitude stuff comes from for me. Is growing up in that environment where we had to rely on each other to be successful. And I think, to a great extent, the third world does a much better job of this than we do in the United States. In the United States, we're pretty spoiled, in comparison to the rest of the world. And in the rest of the world, family is the only thing.
The only thing that
it's the only thing that matters, because that's the only thing that makes it possible. And I think to an extent, my parents working and my family were the only reason, and our faith was the only reason that I was able to persevere.
So you mentioned also that your parents did not went to college, and you were the first one who actually went to college. And my first question is, how that was, if that was a big success in your family that you were able to actually have a college degree, and how do you feel now about a college degree? Because there is a lot of controversy about college not being the same thing that it used to be.
Right.
That colleges start being more like a business and not really teaching people, just giving them, and I'm not talking about, doctors and stuff, because we do need college.
Right.
But for most professions, what happened in your family when you got that degree?
Well, I think that what I really got probably from my dad, most importantly I got from my dad, is a really, really strong work ethic. So I can work with my hands. In high school, I took all of the trade classes. I did wood shop. I did the electrical shop. I did computers. I worked in the auto shop. I took literally every one of the working with your hands classes, and I would recommend every high school do that. We need those trade programs that exposes people to the working with your hands professions. At the same time, I had my mom, who was a voracious reader and always in pursuit of information and knowledge. And she was brilliant about medicine and things like that, but no college education. Literally just through reading books and studying and talking to people, and learned kind of the old way. Right. I went in the military through the benefits of the military, basically, because my parents could have never afforded for me to go to college, and I didn't see the need to put myself in deep debt. It didn't seem practical to put myself into deep debt when I could use the military as a stepping stone. In our family, we have a saying now. I mean, this is my family, my kids, my wife, and that is, do hard things. If you do hard things early and you build up those skills of doing hard things, and to a degree the military also taught me being able to be uncomfortable, right? And that's what it was. Made it possible for me. The work I put in with the military, the first couple of years I was in the military, allowed me to go to college, which otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do. And so I'm the first of our family to go to college, and then very soon after, my brother also followed suit. Both of us have advanced degrees at this point. So, yeah, I think that where we're at today, though, is it has become more of a business, and people have been convinced that a college degree is your pathway to success. Well, the reality is a bachelor's degree today really doesn't mean much. You'd be smarter to go back to the old thing and be an electrician. Electricians make hundreds of dollars an hour. And most people that have college degrees aren't even working in the field of their college degree, because there's such a glut of all these professions, of all these degrees, and they're basically become diploma mills. They're just you go, you show up enough to get a grade, and then you walk out with a diploma. But at the end of the day, there's no jobs for a lot of these fields.
And most of those fields are going to be replaced in some degree by AI.
Yeah, correct. 100%.
Except for an electrician or a plumber or those.
100%.
And that's something that Mike Rowe from, I don't know if you know who Mike Rowe is, from the Dirty Jobs.
Yeah.
Channel.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's doing amazing shows in Angel Studio. He's also working, he has a foundation trying to promote those type of trade jobs, and which a lot of people are becoming even millionaires doing those stuff, if you know how to run the business properly. So let's switch gears and let's start talking about your career and the military. So why do you decided to go into the military? I mean, the army, and then you actually rejoined after you actually retired. You actually went back in.
I didn't retire. I didn't retire. I've been in and out of the military several different times. I've been both active duty and I've been reserves. And I think that this sort of goes back to kind of doing hard things. Is I seek out difficult situations, essentially. Jordan Peterson has a say. He talks about slaying dragons. Is that when you're young, you've got to learn how to slay little dragons. You slay enough little dragons, you become good at slaying medium-sized dragons. And after you've slayed enough medium-sized dragons, you can start to slay big dragons. And so that's kind of how I've looked at my life. Long before I ever heard about Jordan Peterson, I was already following that principle and always seeking out obstacles as opportunities to make myself smarter, stronger, better, more capable. And so that's why I would go in and out of the military. So I first went in while I was still in high school. I did a couple years in the reserves. I graduated from high school. I went active duty for a couple of years. I got out of active duty, went to college. After college, I rejoined the reserves. I was serving in the reserves. It happened. So I went back on active duty after 9/11, or once 9/11 happened. I served for about 9 years on active duty after 9/11. I deployed to Afghanistan. And then after my final deployment, I went back in the reserves and I came back to Virginia, and that's when I joined the National Intelligence Community. The military, my military career, I've done more things in the military than most people ever dream of. I've been everything from an MP, I was psychological operations, I've been infantry, I was in the field artillery, I deployed with special forces to Afghanistan as an interrogator, ultimately did HUMINT, and then in the reserves, I'm now a warrant officer in the Army Reserves, and I do human intelligence in the Army Reserves, and I'm a senior HUMINT warrant in the Army Reserves. And so all of those things are each in their own way were stepping stones to ultimately where I'm at today.
And the skills that inside of the military career, what are the skills that you think actually help you more? Is it the discipline? Is it being humble? I mean, humility, or is situational awareness?
Yeah, I think that it's all of those things, but really it's probably the single thing that comes out of the military is learning to be uncomfortable. You learn to do hard things and uncomfortable things. And what that gives you is it gives you something that if you haven't served, you don't have. It forces you to do public speaking, carry a rucksack and, march miles through the desert. It forces you to live in a tent. You get new leaders all the different times. It's not like, you can't compare, say, working in a clothing store in retail with having to hump a 100-pound rucksack with mortar rounds and carrying a machine gun. You just learn to do things. So then when you leave the military, everything is easy. Everything is easy after you've served in the military.
Because there is a lot of military people that I know that they are close to retirement and they're sort of concerned of what my life is going to be outside of the military work. And so I guess they will hear that and we be happy. Oh, it's going to get easier in the public sector. In terms of your job as the National Security Advisor, without losing the audience in the acronyms and all the complicated things, what is a regular day for you when you were doing all that stuff? I mean, when you get to your office, I don't know if you even get to get coffee, but what is it that is a regular day?
It's hard to say. I think every day is going to be different, right? But it's very much like any other job, except for the simple fact that everything you're dealing with is classified. In my case, everything I was dealing with was probably 95% of what I was dealing with was top secret information. And it's kind of hard to explain what that means generally, but basically what it means is it's information that our government has that we don't want our adversaries to know we have. Right? We have information on them, and we don't want them to know we know that. So a good example.
That's like your wife. She got information, but she don't want information she knows that you know.
Kind of. Right, correct. Kind of. But so, for example, like just the Iran situation right now. I worked Iran for almost 10 years. Literally, I used to say that I knew the names of Qasem Soleimani's girlfriends, right? That was the most unclassified thing I could say. Right? I was trying to insinuate that I know everything there is to know about Qasem Soleimani. We know who he meets with, who he talks to, wherever he goes. That's not public information, right? But we need to know those things. So like, for example, in Iran right now, we know where all of their missiles are. They may be buried 3 miles underground, but we know where they're at. We may not be able to blow them up right now, but we know they're there. So it's just like any other job, except you have to be able to keep secrets, right? First of all, not everybody can do that. And you've also got to have an awareness about yourself, I think, that what you're doing is important and no one may ever know that you did it, right? So,
but in that regard, first of all, the level of stress is greater than probably most people, because the national security of the country sometimes could be in information that you're handling. The stress that your superiors are not paying attention to what you are saying that also probably brings stress. So there's a lot of stress, but also you got your house, you have your family, you have your wife, your kids. So how those two coexist when you are coming home from a very highly situation, God forbid you know that Iran already have nuclear capabilities, and then you go home and your wife is making you dinner and she probably is upset because there's no ketchup or something. And you're coming from this big thing. How do that, like a human person, you deal with that situation?
You have to be able to compartmentalize. you have to be able to do that. The only effect it ever really had on me, it was rather easy for me. You just don't talk about work because you can't, right? And when you're home, you are talking about how important the ketchup is. But fortunately, my wife actually also worked in the community, kind of. So we were both dealing with our own stresses. Most of it's coworker stress inflicted. It has nothing to do with the classified work we're doing. It has to do with the people sometimes. But I really only ever had one problem. Is I would have, and it's kind of a funny story. I would have this reoccurring dream where I had this secret that was going to become revealed, and it was like an anxiety dream. It was like an anxiety dream, and I would wake up, and it was always when I was working on a really important topic, and I would wake up thinking that everybody had found out about this secret thing that I was working on, and I'd be like stressed out because I'm like waking up and I'm not awake yet. That was really the only thing that how it ever affected me. It's not for everybody, but you go through the security vetting process, and they know who to look for, and one of the military and the national security community does a really good job of when the stress is getting too much for somebody, they know how to make sure that they're okay. So it's all kind of built into the industry, and how we do it is that we make sure we're looking out for people that are having those kinds of problems. And right now, with all of the tumult that's created by the Trump administration coming in, where we basically are trying to kick out a lot of these people that are not aligned with the values of the current administration, or asking them to leave, that causes its own stress as well. And when I went in, one of the things that I tried very hard with the staff was to get them to realize that, and I had multiple meetings where I would say, I want you to stay here, but you gotta be in alignment with the values and the directions of the administration. If you can't do that, you need to leave with honor, right? Don't go and become an insider threat and, go work for the Chinese or the Russians because you're angry that somebody because the president's only going to be there for 4 years. We need you. You have a lot of experience. You just can't let your own biases influence, which has its own hurdles. Is whether or not you can keep your own political bias out of the analysis.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the harder things to do is to actually check your political views on something, especially if you have those glasses on.
Correct.
To take them on, I think that's a skill all by itself. But now in this time with the technology being advancing so fast, I assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that back in the day, everything was probably, paper, and it was easier to keep it safe. And also you have experts like yourself reading the stuff and have an analysis and come out with human conclusions. Now we have AI into the mix. And the AI, I see it in regular conversations and in regular industries becoming a problem. Is great. We all love AI, but it has also issues and personal issues. For example, you are a very experienced lawyer, but then you're in a meeting, and then, I wonder, how can we litigate this? Well, let's see what ChatGPT says about that. And then you as a lawyer is like, I'm right here. How are you going to take ChatGPT opinion over mine? Is that happening that or do you think it could happen in intelligence community when you got these smart analysts with years of experience, and then we have this AI that you feed information to, and it's also going to give you an analysis? And who do you trust? Is it this artificial thing? Is it that a reality yet, or do you think it will become a reality soon?
We're dealing with it right now. It's not going to replace the senior analyst, the one that's going to interpret it. It'll probably enable the junior analyst. The fear, the danger is that you rely on the AI for your conclusion. Right? That's the fear. The fear is that the fear would be that somebody who is not an analyst, that does not know the subject matter, is asking the question of the AI, gets an answer. They know nothing of the topic, but the AI has given them an answer. You're going to need an analyst that also knows the subject matter to interrogate the data, to interrogate the information. And what I would say is refine the algorithmic answer with the human intuition and the human interpretation and the human, right? So the fear is that you take the analyst out. The analyst being the subject matter expert, the one that knows how to do analysis, that can see whether or not the AI, the machine learning, is producing
reliable data.
And so you've got to be trained in how to interrogate the data.
Because, for example, if the AI says, with all the data that I gathered, I think Iran already have nuclear weapon, and then you got a senior analyst saying, no, they're not.
Correct.
Who do you believe?
Okay, well, that's where somebody has to say to the AI, give us the sourcing you have on why you have come. Why do you think? See, a lot of people talk to AI like it's thinking. It's not. What brings you to that conclusion? Yeah. What data are you relying on that brings you to that conclusion? And it should be able to provide you sources, right? And at the same time, the analyst that is saying, no, they're not, you should be able to go to that analyst and say, what information are you relying on that has led you to that conclusion?
And not only that, on top of that,
interrogating the data.
We know that China is also using AI, and we know other countries. I mean, probably Iran too.
Everybody's
using it. If you get to hack their AI and start providing false information, that will be a great weapon,
of course,
for us. But it's the same potentiality. I mean, it's potentially could happen to us too.
Correct.
And
so, how do you protect the integrity of your AI that it doesn't get outside influences? Right? Or inside influences.
Yeah, we can have.
Because the people that are developing the AI come to that development with their own biases on what are the right answers, what are the right algorithmic equations that need to go into the machine learning. I'm not a machine learning expert, but I do know that it's going to come to, the AI is going to spit out an answer. It's not thinking, it's interpreting the data that it has and giving you an answer to the question you're asking. But here's where the human has to come in. Was that the right question? Because you may not be asking the right question. You may be getting an answer that satisfies your limited understanding of the question. So, for example, using your example, right? You get the machine learning AI comes out and it says they have likely already developed a nuclear weapon capability. Let's just pretend. And the analyst says, we don't have any evidence of that. You go back to the machine learning AI and you say, what led you to that conclusion? And it gives you
the findings,
maybe some findings, some sourcing. And then you say to the analyst, have you looked at this sourcing? And the analyst may say, no, I haven't. And now we're using something that's very discrete, a yes or no, right? A yes or no, right? The analyst may say, no, I have not read that. Let me look at it. Now, the analyst is going to include those sources that it wasn't aware of maybe before. And then you say, well, what do you think now? And the guy says, well, I mean, it raises the likelihood a little bit, but it doesn't say for sure that they have, right? It informs them. So in other words, what I think AI will most likely be used for is to better interrogate the data. The trick is going to be whether or not we're going to turn the decision over to the AI or whether or not we're going to perpetually forever question the results that come out of the data. And I think that we should perpetually forever question anything that comes out of the
this segue to what you and I were talking off camera is external threats, but also internal threats. And this is something that I think most technology companies don't think of doing, but now with your expertise, sort of like, wow, we have to go deeper into our background checks. Who is touching the AI? In technology companies, who is touching your client's data? Who's monitoring things? And usually what is required by the compliance, the standards, by NIST, by all those standards that CMMC, is that you do a regular background check, which, you know, we do no criminal records, the normal things that you do and for most jobs is fine. But then you start touching into that foreign governments will be willing to pay our employees to get access to our clients' data.
Correct.
And and those companies, I'm talking about cybersecurity companies, I'm talking about IT management companies, how do they actually protect themselves? And you were mentioning some,
yeah, it used to be that there was sort of that the target of foreign countries was national security classified information, right? That was the target. They wanted to know, the foreign adversary wanted to know the plans for the battleship, or they want the plans for the missile, or they want somebody in the room that's going to be making the decisions about an exercise or the deployment of a new weapon system or whatever the case may be. Well, now the real vector for foreign adversarial intelligence is everything. Because everything now is all connected. Everything's all connected. Now what they realize is I don't need the plans to the battleship. All I need is to know who the vendor is that's providing a few chips for the radar system on the battleship. And if I can identify the vendor that's providing that chip, even if it's a really, or that system, then what I want to do is I want to just identify one vulnerability in the ship. And if I identify 50 vulnerabilities from 50 different vendors, all I got to do, and this is what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese are basically saying every aspect of engagement with the West is warfare. Every economic exchange, every diplomatic exchange, every business exchange, every relationship. The Chinese see everything they are doing as warfare with the West. It's not just the United States. It's South American countries. They're all over all the South American countries. I mean, we know a big part of why Trump went into Venezuela and dealt with Maduro is because the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians were all in bed with Maduro, right? It wasn't just Venezuelan oil. It was foreign adversarial intelligence operations that were in Venezuela that were then able to influence Venezuela and then work their way into the United States. The Chinese call it unrestricted warfare. Everything is warfare. So I guess my point is now the vector of threat is supply chains. It's data. It's what we were talking about before is like who's touching the AI. If I want to influence an AI, I don't need to recruit somebody that works there. All I need is to recruit somebody that provides a tiny service for that entity that has some kind of contact with the developers or that can provide me access, and then I can do a cyber intrusion from China, right? And those people may not even know that's what they're doing, right? They may just be taking the AI and doing something with their own laptop and not even realize that the Chinese are in their laptop,
doing all kind of stuff,
doing things that they're not even aware
of. So how do we prevent in our background checks? You were mentioning before, off camera, that we need to actually up our game in the background check with people that we hire, people that we have internally, financial statement, unusual behavior, change of things. What will be
the first thing that I would say that in particular the tech industry needs to do is they need to realize that the Chinese in particular are stealing everything. They are gobbling up all they can, data-wise. Whether that's, and it's like we were talking about. You may be a small company with only 5 people, but you may have 10 clients, right? So if they can put one person in your 5-person group, that one person gives them access to 10 clients worth of their data, right? And now we're talking about machine learning, influence operations on social media. We're talking about all this stuff that feeds into, this big cloud of data that's out there. And you don't even know they have your data, right? I mean, you don't even know because they've got a person in the team that's giving them access that you don't even know about, and that person does not have a security clearance because it's just a regular tech company. It's not part of the national security complex, right? So my point is that every tech company should be aware that their IP, their data access is a targetable thing by, in particular, the Chinese government. And the interesting thing is the Chinese have a model that's never before been used, which is, I call it's basically like intelligence mercenaries. These people aren't trained by the government. They're not even working for the government. They're not tasked by the government. They may have no direct relationship with the Chinese government. But they know that if they go back to China and they steal everything off your hard drive, your new 3D printer design, They just go back to China. They go to the Chinese government and they say, hey, I got a great design for a new 3D printer. Yeah, and the Chinese government gives them the money, and now all of a sudden you've got a Chinese competitor for your 3D printer, right? And so another good example is I was thinking about it in preparation for this. Let's say that I want to use cheap labor and basically use a Chinese company to develop my widget, to build my widget for me. So I go to China, and I go in, and I bring in, and I say, this is what I want you guys to make. Well, the factory down the street just automatically just starts making that widget because they just took your designs, they take it over to the factory next door, they put a Chinese name on it, and they're competing with you.
Yeah, no, well, that happened with big brands too,
and it happens with everybody, and that's what they're going to go after. They're going to go after the big brands. They're going to basically do knockoffs of everything they can, and this is very different than the intelligence. Our economic security is more important today than it ever has been because of the sort of the mindset of the Chinese with regard to unrestricted warfare. They just want to win, and they will steal everything they can, and there's really nothing you can do about it. There's really nothing you can do about it except making sure that your own staff, the people that you're hiring, are not working or don't have a loyalty outside of your company.
So that was going to be my question, because now a lot of tech companies actually have overseas labor a lot. You just to cut costs, there's a lot of people in the Philippines, a lot of people in India, a lot of people in South America. How do these companies, including Eagle Tech, how do we protect ourselves from hiring people that could do harm to our clients?
Well, I would definitely start taking a closer look at your internal employees, people who have access to your data, people who have access to your internal workings of your company. You need to be doing background investigations on them that are deeper than just, do they have a criminal record? Do they have any foreign investments, right? Do they, is their social media full of adversarial, economically adversarial companies? Have they signed agreements with your company that say that they will not take your information and give it to another company, right? There's all these things that need to be being done that if you're not doing them, you're leaving yourself vulnerable. And foreigners don't care about any of those agreements, remember. This is just people that are going to abide by the rules.
So in that regard, I'm assuming that there are already firms doing these type of backgrounds that are deeper than the regular ones for the intelligence community.
They are.
Do you know if that same companies or do you think could do this for tech companies as well? Or do you think that this is a new business that it could be developed for tech companies? It's like, we're going to do background, but deeper than the regular backgrounds for tech companies that will target different areas other than what the intelligence community actually targets.
Right. Probably the thing that I would recommend is first just recognizing that the enemy, that they are there, that they are trying to steal everything from you. Hardening yourself as much as possible, right, by just recognizing that you are actually a commodity that they are trying to steal. That's number one, because if you don't believe that, then it doesn't really matter. If you don't believe that you're actually vulnerable to being robbed, essentially, of your intellectual property, or robbed of your data, or if you don't recognize that, then it doesn't really matter. The second thing is there's a great book called, it's called The Great Heist. That's what it's called. The Great Heist. It's just a book that just came out, really talks very in-depth about, so getting smart is my point, is getting smart about the Chinese threat to economic security in the United States. Every business owner should be doing that. We're all part of the national security of the United States. Our economic security is part of the national security, and we need to recognize that. And so all these companies need to be getting smart about social media vulnerabilities. Literally the Chinese are doing about 30,000 recruitments a day. Every day they're sending out 30,000 cyber recruitments a day that are offering, low effort, high pay, no travel, work from home. But really a lot of those things are just elicitations to try and get you to come and form a relationship with them so they can say, oh, we see that you worked at such and such and such company. Are you still there? Do you still work there? How can...
We can collaborate.
We can collaborate. Can you write a white paper for us? There's all these kinds of things. So it's if you're somebody in the national security community, you're already a target. But what the economic community needs to realize is that they're also a target. And really, another one that's a huge vulnerability is the academic community. Because the academic community thinks that we just teach people. Well, a lot of them do the research and development. They do the fundamental research and development that foreign adversaries really, really, really want. But professors don't think of themselves as being part of the national security apparatus of the United States. They just think they're teaching people the most innovative technique or the best idea or whatever the case may be. So they're teaching people. They may actually, we just had a situation where former U.S. fighter pilots were training in the U.S. Chinese pilots.
No way.
And doing it in other countries and being recruited to go to other countries and train foreign nationals how to fly jets. That is essentially, and it may not even be classified information, but you're giving them access to data or information that they otherwise would not have.
And they should not have either. We, as a cybersecurity firm, are always fighting hackers, and we fight AI fakes. So now the deep fake and they're cloning voices. Now you remember the people used to send these phishing emails from the CFO. Now they're cloning the CFO voice. So it's getting a little bit trickier now to protect people. The intelligence community, you have to filter so much information. How do you guys understand or filter what is true, what is the fake? Is there a way you guys double check? How is that done, if you can share that?
Clearly, a lot of the intelligence community has they have capabilities that the regular citizen doesn't have. They're not going to be as vulnerable to a deep fake influence operation as just regular people are, right? And that is, one of the things that I've thought about is if I was going to create some training for analysts to be able to discern AI, deep fakes, and things like that, or just machine learning crafted influence operations of any kind, I would say the number one thing is you got to have critical thinking skills. We've got to focus on critical thinking. You cannot just accept things at face value anymore. You have to question everything. You cannot accept anything at face value, even if it's your favorite influencer that's on social media or whatever the case may be, or a podcaster or whatever. No matter how much you think you know that guy, a 15-second clip can get propagated very quickly because they know. And here's the thing, and this goes at sort of like other parts of the foreign adversarial intelligence collection. If they pull down everything, let's say just from Facebook and Twitter or whatever, and they can analyze who are the most vulnerable 5,000 people in the United States that are going to be willing to share this particular clip. Machine learning is going to allow them to do that.
Yeah.
And it can then be really targeted. It can be really micro-targeted at the people most vulnerable to share and spread the disinformation, right? So that's a big part of what AI machine learning is going to do. It's going to make identifying vulnerable people easier because it's going to be able to aggregate all that data. And then I can just send 30,000 elicitations.
So when you mentioning that, one of the things that is very hard to do is to convince small and medium businesses that they are targets. Because most businesses, I've never been attacked. I'm not a target. I'm not the Pentagon. I'm not the CIA. Right. I'm not. Right. I mean, I just do this. I don't think I'm a target. As an intelligence officer, what can you tell those companies?
I would just
say
they
don't know.
I'm not as you know, Edward, I am not a cyber guy. I'm not even an AI guy. I'm a intelligence threats guy. So I'm going to look, putting that intel hat on, I'm going to look for every imaginable vulnerability. If you have access to data that I want, you're never going to see me coming unless you know what to look for. What is the tradecraft the enemy might use to get inside my little network, my little business, to get access to my client's data. It can be financial data for an influence operation that they want, so it depends on first recognizing that you are a potential target, getting smart about the tradecraft used to target you, and that is the first thing you can do. Then if you see something that's suspicious on your network or see somebody acting suspiciously in your office, then you're more informed about what is suspicious and what isn't, basically. Right? You just can't take anything for granted anymore. That's the bottom line. You can't. The Chinese are after all the pharmaceutical industry. They're after all the telecommunications. They're after every form of innovative technology. If you're working innovative technology of any kind, you're a potential target.
And it's even worse for government contractors. I mean, because that's the direct access to.
Well, the government vendors are directly connected to the government, and so they're even a higher target. Even if they're not. Yeah. And here's the thing: even if they're not working on classified projects, the projects may not be classified. But the fact that you're doing the work may provide access and a vector so that the adversary can get this information that they otherwise don't have to pay for. Oh. And that's why the book's called The Great Heist, because it's basically they're stealing everything that's not nailed down.
So in with our war with China, and I know there's other actors, but the main one is China. Do you think that this is an asymmetric war? Do you think that they are doing to us way more stuff that we're doing to them, or do you think that it is a fair war?
No, we're not even playing on the same field. Now, on the national security side, we're pretty well defended. Militarily, we don't have anything to worry about, I don't think, from China. I mean, we do in the grand scheme of things, right? Because we don't want to get in a fight with China. But on the economic front, they're eating our lunch. They already ate our breakfast. They're eating our lunch, and they're about ready to eat our dinner. So on the economic security side, we're losing.
And well, that will come with my next question. What would you tell a CEO about a strategic patience and resilience against a long-term pressure?
The time for patience is over. We've got to basically get almost offensive about how we're protecting ourselves. We've got to be very, very diligent about protecting our economic security. It's no more like we're going to wait these guys out. Those days are over. There's no time for strategic patience. People need to become informed. First of all, they need to recognize that they're a target. They've got to harden their defenses, and they've got to get smart about the vectors of attack that are going to come our direction. I would highly recommend people read The Great Heist, and at the same time, I would say, if you're inclined and you're working in the national security space, or you have clients that are working in the national security space, you need to look also at unrestricted warfare and understand that they don't see warfare the same way that we do. And that's not asymmetric. Unrestricted means everything is warfare. Diplomatic, pharmaceutical, chemical, like every kind of business transaction, every relationship you have, they see it as warfare, as winning the war against the West.
So that, I was going to ask this question, but now that you just deal with that stuff, it looks obvious. That the question was how you distinguish healthy economic competition from national security risk.
Yeah.
And is almost, you cannot distinguish them.
You cannot, because they want to become a global, they want to become a if not the global superpower and supplant the United States.
No, that's obvious.
And so this is economic warfare. It is not military warfare. It's economic warfare. And right now we know that to a great extent they control a lot of the production, right? They're all over Africa. They were making inroads into South America. They're making inroads into Europe, right? I think that this is one of the reasons that the Trump administration has done what they did with Venezuela and done what they did with Iran. One of the things that I said in a recent podcast, a recent interview, is that, Iran for 47 years has essentially terrorized the entire world. Iran did, right? For 47 years. And Iran has threatened the Straits of Hormuz, the oil supply, for 47 years. And for the first time in modern history, Iran is no longer threatening the Straits of Hormuz. That everybody that's in business should be thanking the Trump administration right now for liberating the global oil economy from the threat of Iran. And, ultimately, Venezuela's oil production has been just crippled since, in the last 20 years. Like, it's crippled. It's almost a fraction of what it was. And so by freeing up the oil supply in Venezuela and freeing up the oil supply out of the Middle East, I think we're going to see an economic explosion. I do. I really do. And I think that it warns, it basically, for the first time now, we control the oil supply for China. China gets 90% of its oil out through the Middle East.
To the Middle East, yeah.
And the other 10% was coming from Venezuela. And so now China now has to play ball. It's a huge pressure point. It's a huge pressure point on containing, I don't want to say containing it's containing the threat of China, not the growth of China, but the threat of China. Because now they can't, if they threaten us, you can shut off the oil.
And is that fair to say that because of everything that's happened geopolitical, understanding that they want to target the economy, so that means that every business in the U.S. have to protect themselves because they're going to come after anybody who is vulnerable.
Correct.
Small, medium, micro, or whoever.
In particular, in the research and development fields. Okay, but ultimately the data is a commodity. And so, you've got to protect the data you're responsible for. We saw the hacks of Target. We saw hacks of Walmart. We see there's a
Best Buy
reason.
too, yeah.
And it's not for credit card information. It's not. It's for buying. It's all of the information. It's not just like the credit card information. It's your identity.
So going back to the personal, we're about to wrap it up. Tell me, I believe that you held for 25, when you were 25, that you actually revised.
Yeah, something that I have changed in my position from when I was 25, I think is kind of where the direction of where you wanted to go with that, right? And I would say that probably there's not a whole lot. But I think that my belief that people were generally good, I believed as sort of a statement of fact that people were generally good. I think that people believe they're good, but they're not actually good. People are generally selfish. And as a young person, I think I believed that people were
good.
In their heart, they were good. But the reality is they're selfish.
I mean, and we see that in babies. I mean, you got to teach babies how to behave.
Well, and I have a saying about some of our enemies, like say the Iranians or the Chinese or even the Russians. Do you think that the governments now, the government of those countries, do they care about the prosperity and the health and security of our children?
No, not at all.
No, probably not. Does the U.S. the average member of the U.S. government care about the health and prosperity of the people of China?
Some might.
I think most of them do. As somebody who's worked there, I don't think that's why I think this move with Iran is such a huge deal, because we don't normally do this. But they've been threatening everybody for 47 years. Somebody had to do something about it, and Trump just took the chance to do it. But generally speaking, we have to be attacked before we're gonna do something. It's very rare for us to not do that.
Go on the offense, right?
To go on the offense, right? And so I guess, like I said, I think that we as Americans want everybody to just be happy and healthy and prosperous and practice their faith. That's what we believe. We believe in those freedoms. But there are regimes around the world that do not believe that.
But I will go as far as say they don't even care about their own people. let alone us.
Exactly.
What moment you almost quit, but you didn't?
That I almost quit. I can't think of anything where I almost quit. I have many times wanted to quit because I felt it was too hard. I'm in lawsuits. I'm in after January 6th, I was accused of being an extremist by the Army, and I had to defend myself against my own Army, which was mostly heartbreaking to me that people in my own Army didn't know me well enough to say, no way, there's no way, Tom. If anything, I love people too much. Would not be an extremist, especially against my own government, right? And so I would say that not so much quitting as being heartbroken and wanting to quit out of sort of sadness, disappointment. But then I realized that no, I'm going through this because, this dragon has attacked me. And now I have to be ready to slay this dragon. And I've been very successful so far slaying some of these big dragons that kind of came out of their den and tried to attack
Well,
me.
but it's good that you're now in the big lakes, slaying the big dragons, right?
I'm slaying some big dragons. That's right.
Talking about dragons, is what book other than the Bible, I would assume, shaped your character?
A book other than the Bible, The Diary of Anne Frank. The Diary of Anne Frank, bar none, the most influential book I've ever read. I think everybody should read it. Probably right after that, 1984. But the Diary of Anne Frank is probably the single most important book that I ever read, because it showed me what true evil was, and it motivated me to have that identification of what true evil is, and it motivated me ultimately to serve in the military to fight what I consider evil.
As working in the intelligence community for so long, what practice do you advise us, the common people, to keep focus? Don't lose that focus, because I assume that you guys have to be focused, especially when you're doing this deep analysis on situations. Is that a common practice within the community that everybody knows? Or
I would say for me, that focus has been on, Marcus Aurelius wrote his journals were called Meditations. Marcus Aurelius, one of the first Stoics, right? He basically said nothing good ever comes from fear, anger, or hope. And what he means by hope is he means hope without works. In other words, nothing good ever comes from being fearful, being angry, or laying around waiting for something to happen. And the Stoics basically believe that there are things outside of your life that you cannot control. So you shouldn't try and control those things. You can only control your own feelings, your own thoughts, and your own actions. And that those feelings, thoughts, and actions should be devoted towards a virtuous purpose, right? They should be motivated towards the good of humanity. So what I would say, for me, as an intelligence person, just as a person, period, I would say that you've got to realize that, first of all, it's not about you. Have faith, and once you have faith, have no fear, and don't give in to your emotions. The things that are outside you that you can't control, the only thing you can control is how you react to them, right? And so if you give in to fear, then you're going to be hesitant to do what is right. If you give in to anger, then you're not going to be able to stay on task because your emotions are driving you, right? You're going to make mistakes, miscalculations, right? And then at the same time, get to work, right? Don't lay around hoping something's going to get better. So I guess for me, and kind of going full circle all the way back to the Unreasonable Man, being unreasonable for me is exactly that. No fear, no anger, and work. Do the work. And ultimately, you're going to be successful, and I think, in anything you do.
So I got this question for you, but first, I want you to tell me if you remember the phrase that you have at the bottom of your signature in your email. Mm-hmm. What was that?
Thomas Paine quote. I've had it at the bottom of my email now for, I can't even tell you how long. It's over 20 years probably. And that is that if there must be trouble, let it be in my day, so that my children may have peace. And I think that is, to a great extent, one of the principal motivators for me to be the Unreasonable Man, is because, if not me, who? Right? Like, if I can do something about it, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to do everything I can to make the world a better place, and to fight tyranny, and to fight evil, and and so it's about trying to make the world better for our children.
So in that context, what peace means to you?
Peace is sitting on my back deck, smoking a cigar, drinking a Modelo or a bourbon, and my wife and kids sleeping, and your wife and kids sleeping peacefully.
It's a beautiful way to portray that. That's what we're looking for, right? To have a peaceful life, but we have to work hard.
Correct.
We have to fight hard.
Yeah.
For peace.
For peace.
So I that reminds me that Jordan Peterson says that you have to be able to inflict damage.
Yeah. He says in order to be good, you have to be dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah. Probably one of the most powerful statements that I think anybody's ever made in the modern world, and that is, he's basically summing up that, he doesn't mean to be dangerous necessarily physically. He means to be dangerous mentally, emotionally, and physically. And because if you aren't dangerous capability-wise, if you are not dangerous in your capabilities, you can't be good. You can't be. If you're incompetent, uneducated, passive, then you're going to be devoured. And you become part of what is not good. Because you can't bring good into the world if you're powerless. You have to be dangerous. And I think that, I think it's a powerful statement. And it's funny, it goes back to the slaying dragons. Mm-hmm. How do you get dangerous? You slay little dragons. After you've slain enough of those little dragons, you go slay medium dragons, and then you can fight the big dragons. And when you can do that, I believe you're dangerous.
All right, I think that's a great way to finish the podcast. And just to end it, how people follow you. If they, I want to follow Tom to see what he's doing, and I know that you're working in many projects, and people probably will want to follow you to see when the documentary is out, and to follow everything that you do, because you're involved in so many things.
You can find me easiest on Twitter at Speciale, SPECIALE 4 VA. That's where you can find me on X, not on Twitter, on X. And then you can also find my website. It comes up. You Google my name, Thomas Speciale, and you'll find thomasspeciale.com. And you can find out, all of my, myriad of efforts that I have, going on.
Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Excellent.
I thank the people for listening, and remember to subscribe. Remember to share. It is important for us, and was trying to build up this community. But I think today was a great message for everybody, for regular day-to-day citizens, also for entrepreneurs, for companies, and for people that have sensitive information that they have to protect. And then we have Tom here telling us they are after us. We need to take care of ourselves. The best way to work in America's security is to work in your own security. So with that, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for those that are watching us, since we are doing this podcast and it's fairly new. Subscribing, liking, and sharing is greatly appreciated. And until the next time, thank you.